Okay, welcome. Good morning. It's great to see you all. This is an interesting sort of event to host nowadays and stuff. I always have to wait for the video folks to sort of give me the heads up because we've got the online folks coming on. So when I walked up here, there were about 60 people already online, and so I assume that'll probably approach 100 or more. So we really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us here today at the Environmental Professionals Network. And thank you to those of us that are joining us remotely via our EPN YouTube live stream. My name is Jeff Sharp, and I'm the Director of the School of Environment and Natural Resources at Ohio State University. I want to credit the EPN for doing a solid job of following and adhering to the many necessary changes and evolutions to our university-based standards for health and safety on our campus. If you're like us and if any of you have done any programming, it's like week by week how the rules change. So I appreciate the team's effort to sort of constantly be on top of that. It's been a real challenge for us, but it's great. This is about as normal as we've ever had it before, so great to see sort of like a loosening of some of those restrictions. Since our sudden pivot to hosting educational and networking events to virtual formats 2 years ago, we are glad to be in person and hosting our 7th hybrid event today. I suspect that these hybrid events will become a standard sort of feature of the EPN. I do appreciate the video team that puts this all together. It is quite an effort to sort of like pull this off. There's a QR code located at your table that will take you to an online digital brochure. Please take a photo of that QR code to view today's event agenda, speaker bios, and a list of sponsors and co-hosts. In our pursuit to reduce the material waste created from our events, we are reducing the number of printed brochures that we distribute and increasing our provision of digital information this year. We have arranged for our programs to be zero waste events, so please follow the signs posted on various recycling and composting bins located to the side here. Hopefully you can sort of interpret that well, and I've noticed over time people have gotten much better at it. Like many of our March EPN breakfast programs of the past, today's event is a collaboration between the Water Management Association of Ohio, which we refer to as WAMO in acronym form, the Ohio Water Resource Center, and the Terra Aqua Student Organization. This is probably about the 4th or 5th time I think we've done this, and we really appreciate that collaboration. A few individuals who worked with the EPN to organize today's activities include Linda Weavers, Zuzana Baurahavo, Audrey Sawyer, Eugene Bragg, Cole Hoffman, and Melissa Maneri. We will be hearing directly from Melissa and Linda later in the program. I want to give a special thanks to Dana Oleskowitz for assisting with the back-end registration work. Students registered at no cost today, courtesy of Ohio State School of Environment and Natural Resources, and with special support for Ohio State School of Earth Sciences, Delco, and Aquedoc, as well as an individual donation from Dr. Bob Verpetries. We appreciate these donations and allows us to host many students here at our events. Just to show of hands, could we have everybody that is a student raise your hand? One of our goals with this event is to create opportunities for environmental professionals to network with the next generation of students. So if you did see any hands go up and you have a chance to visit with them on your way out the door, please do so. It's a great opportunity for them to learn a little bit about what you're doing in the field. Some of these folks we've learned over time, and there are some of you here that were previous graduates that did come to the EPN and sort of like met some of the folks in our community. So we appreciate all the efforts people put into sort of networking with our students. The student sponsorships allow us to offer no-cost participation to students. They also allow us to connect with a wider and live audience through virtual formats. We are proud to have hosted hundreds of live stream participants each month since returning to limited in-person activities. We greatly value our partnership with WAMO. Melissa will share more later today, but we see a tremendous benefit in co-hosting spring programming with WAMO, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that they, along with a variety of other different state agencies and some faculty within our school, are hosting the 2022 Ohio Rivers Symposium. Please visit WAMO's table in the registration area to learn more, and I believe details to register are currently being shared with the YouTube chat by Molly Bean. On March 22nd, World Water Day, last year the United Nations put out a global call for community leaders to step out and ask what water access means to their friends and neighbors and to make records of water's true value in their communities. Little did I know in terms of making a record of it, we'd have a faculty step up and sort of say, I'm interested in doing a whole documentary on this. So we appreciate people stepping up across the state, and especially our Dr. Ramiro Berardo for stepping forward and creating a dialogue that was needed on water affordability in Ohio to discuss and identify solutions to mitigate the cost of water to low-income residents in our communities. We hosted a virtual program 1 year ago that sought to address this issue, though it was clear more attention to this topic is needed. That's when Dr. Berardo, a professor of environment and natural resource policy here at Ohio State, organized a small team to travel the state to learn from water utility managers, experts, and advocates in communities big and small, rural and urban, about the challenge of water affordability. That had resulted in And Water for All, an educational documentary examining the opportunities and challenges that governmental and non-governmental entities are facing today to secure clean and affordable water and what to expect in the coming decade. I've known Ramiro has been working on this tirelessly, and it's amazing as a byproduct of the whole sort of like COVID thing. I've been very impressed with Ramiro's developing video skills and storytelling skills. One of the byproducts, I think, all of this is we've learned how to use video technology in ways we've never known before. Ramiro took it to the next step. So I'd be curious if any of you, after seeing this, are inspired to sort of take the next step like Ramiro has. Step up and tell me about it, because I'd just be interested. But Ramiro would probably love to be able to tell you stories about what he's learned in this whole process. So a real credit to sort of like one of the byproducts of COVID, and I'm excited to see what we see here. This documentary will be a debut today, which runs for about 60 minutes. This film screening will be immediately followed by an extended educational networking event with water, finance, and policy leaders. This information is detailed in the program agenda. I recognize there are some individuals who traveled a long distance from Toledo and other communities in Ohio to join us today. I understand some other participants in the film are also with us on the live stream, including from Northeast Ohio. Thank you for making time to visit with us, watch this film debut, and we are excited to welcome you to our community. We are looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this work, and I'm excited now to hand things over to Ramiro, who's going to provide a little background on what to expect from this film. A reminder that our digital brochure features complete bios for each of today's presenters. A big round of applause for Ramiro Berardo.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. I know many of the faces in the room, but most of the faces I don't. So I'm elated to be able to share this work with all of you. I have my notes too, if I can understand my own writing. So Jeff was saying there's a few things that Ramiro could share with you about what he's learned. I'll tell you 3 factoids that I've learned this last year while working on this project. The first one is, I'm not a professional filmmaker. I'm just a professor. So I embarked in this project with the ignorance of people that get into stuff not knowing what they're getting into. So the first thing I learned is that making a movie is really hard. It's really hard, particularly if you're dealing with a topic like water affordability and access to clean water. There are so many ways of telling a story, so many voices to cover, and sometimes, that's difficult to do. And so I'm sure that if I gave you all the stuff that we have, all our footage, and I asked you to edit a movie, each one of you here would come up with a different way of telling the story, right? So it's been really hard, not the least because you always need to have more resources, right? More time, more money, and to make a movie that is a professional looking movie, you need money. So we've made this for a fraction, I would say, of what it would take to make like a documentary that you would see produced by a movie company or Netflix. But I think it looks just as good. So we'll see what you think. And we've been lucky to receive the support of the School of Environment and Natural Resources and the Ohio Water Resources Center. Without their support, we couldn't have done it. A second thing, so it's hard, right? The second thing is it's expensive, like I said. But the third thing is that it's really fun. This is a very collaborative medium by definition. You cannot do things on your own. So if you get lucky and you meet good people, you get to have fun in the process, even though it can be stressful to get it done, right? And I got lucky, and there's a number of people that I would like to thank very quickly. First of all, I had a number of students working on this, undergraduate students, graduate students that helped a little bit with the research that went into putting together the movie. Obviously, we have people here in the room, and I'll talk a little bit more about them when we finish, who gave us their time, and their knowledge and their experiences. And we are so grateful to those people that just wanted to talk to us. Some people didn't want to talk to us because it is a controversial topic, but many people, most of them, really wanted to engage in this conversation about water affordability. And then there are people without whom this movie couldn't have been made, and I'm going to just name 3 people. The first one is, I got really lucky. I'm working with Kirk Mason, who's sitting here in the front table. He's a professional documentarian. Can you stand up for a second, please? Kirk is an editor, he's a cinematographer, and he is great to work with. Thank you, Kirk. We couldn't have made this without Kirk. I got lucky in meeting him at the early stages of this process. The second person that I would like to acknowledge is, he just talked, is Jeff Sharp. As a director of the school, you know, when I came up with this idea, he could have said, "Are you out of your mind asking for support for something like that? Go write a paper," right? Which is what many of us are supposed to be doing. Instead, he said, you know, this sounds like a good idea, it's a relevant topic, and I'll support you in any way I can. I'm very, it's bittersweet for me that, you know, I moved to Ohio State in 2015, and he was the director of the school. This is the guy that I had to talk to when they hired me, and he's been my director now for like 7 years. I know in the next year he might be doing something else. I can only hope that the future leaders of the school have the vision that Jeff has, because he really makes us be the best versions of ourselves, I think. And so, thank you, Jeff. You've been a true inspiration for me all these years at Ohio State. And finally, another person that we couldn't have made this without is a guy that served as my sounding board this year. Every time I was freaking out about something, I would just give this guy a call or leave him a WhatsApp message, and then he would respond with these like 8-minute WhatsApp messages, and we went back and forth like that for a year. And that's Joe Campbell. He's like standing right here. Joe, thank you, Joe. Joe has been an absolute joy to work with. So this is a small team, but it's a committed team, and we hope that you like the story. So please join us in watching this, and then let's have a conversation afterwards. So let's roll it. Thank you.
Water is the backbone, and clean water in particular, the backbone to any great society. You're not going to have healthy humans without it. You're not going to have a healthy economy without it, and you're not going to have a healthy environment without it.
Safe, reliable drinking water is in many ways the definition of development. The availability of sanitary sewer systems is a miracle of the modern era. We've eradicated waterborne diseases that ravaged civilization for centuries. And we've done it with these water and sewer systems that have become ubiquitous in our lifetimes.
The rapid industrialization and urbanization of the United States beginning in the late 19th century posed a wide range of new challenges to ensuring water quality for Americans. By the mid-20th century, the federal government began to build on earlier local efforts to curb water pollution and created specific laws to further that goal. In 1948, the U.S. Congress passed the Water Pollution Control Act, the first policy entirely dedicated to improving water quality across the nation. But the act proved insufficient to bring meaningful changes, and water quality continued to erode in the 1950s and 1960s.
Why can't we get any decent drinking water in this town anymore?
They shouldn't be allowed to dump all that crud in our trout stream.
All we want is a place to swim near home.
How can you expect me to stay in business here if I can't even use this water in my plant?
In Ohio, water quality problems had long been evident. The Cuyahoga River, which runs through Cleveland and discharges into Lake Erie, was the historical poster child of poor water quality in the state.
In 1936, a spark from a blowtorch being used to dismantle a boat ignited floating waste, burning for 5 days. In 1969, another fire in the Cuyahoga, a relative unknown, became an overnight sensation.
In fact, since 1868, the Cuyahoga caught fire in different sections more than a dozen times. The 1969 fire was widely covered in the press and functioned as one of the catalysts for renewed efforts by the U.S. Congress in the 1970s to finally improve water quality.
The Special Subcommittee on Water Pollution will be in order.
The two primary pieces of federal legislation that govern the water and sewer sector are the Clean Water Act of 1972 and the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974. Those laws set water quality standards that utilities around the country are supposed to comply with. Administration of those laws is handled jointly by the U.S. Department of Environmental Protection and by state agencies.
The Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act greatly improved water quality in the U.S. They did so in two ways. First, by instituting tougher regulations to prevent pollution of waterways. And second, by giving financial incentives to local governments through federal grants so that they could build and maintain state-of-the-art wastewater and drinking water infrastructure. Unfortunately, federal financial support dropped significantly in the 1980s, but the regulatory requirements did not. As a result, state and local governments began to shoulder more and more of the financial burden needed to keep water cleaning technology up to date. By 2017, state and local governments were responsible for about 96% of water utility financing.
In urban areas, wastewater flows into a sewer line, which carries it to a centralized sewage treatment plant. This expensive process of waste transportation and treatment requires heavy machinery, energy, and trained personnel. In small towns, the cost per household is high.
As local communities began picking up the water tab, the costs of ensuring clean water access have ultimately been transferred onto local customers. Because cleaning water to high standards is not cheap, water and sewer bills have been rising to levels that exceed income growth for most families. Research published by the Bipartisan Policy Center shows that household income in the U.S. grew 35% from 2000 to 2017, while the average rates for water and wastewater services increased by 136%. In Ohio, the trend is remarkably similar. The Ohio Environmental Protection Agency collects data from utilities and tracks changes in costs of water and sewer bills across the state. In its last report of these data, released in December 2021, the Ohio EPA shows that, on average, sewer annual rate increases have clearly outpaced inflation since the early 1990s. This is also true for drinking water. An important thing to keep in mind is that this doesn't necessarily mean that water services are unaffordable. In fact, most Ohioans can pay for their water and sewer bill without facing significant financial challenges. Yet for some, paying their bills on time can be a considerable burden. But what do people mean when they talk about water being affordable? The answer is not so simple.
For most people in the general public and the way you and I would think about affordability, we're normally thinking of the household pocketbook. How much does a family have to pay? When folks in the water sector talk about affordability, sometimes what they're really thinking about is the price of the water system, the pipes, the treatment plant, the reservoirs, and the costs associated with meeting the regulatory requirements for providing those things.
Water and wastewater infrastructure in Ohio and everywhere across the country is expensive. So there's both the capital part of it, which is when you have to build something new, but then there's the other part of it that is what we call operation and maintenance. And that's just the day-to-day cost that it takes to run the infrastructure that you have.
Affordability is closely related to the size of a utility. Large systems, the Clevelands, the Toledos, they get a lot of attention because a lot of people live there. And so there's a tendency for us, I think, sometimes to think that water affordability is a problem of cities. But actually, the most severe affordability problems are in smaller systems. In the state of Ohio, yeah, there are affordability challenges in Cleveland and Toledo, but there are probably just as severe challenges where small communities lack the economies of scale and the kind of expertise and human capital to really have excellent systems that run efficiently.
Across the board, there is a tremendous diversity of our water systems, from the big Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland, down to small mom and pop, what we call transient systems, the smallest systems that might have a single well. The challenges and the solutions are going to vary depending on where you are. In the rural areas, there's a whole other set of challenges. Sometimes there's geography issues or distance. We've seen a lot of regional systems also in different parts of the state have some success, and we've been trying to support those with dedicated funding as well.
A defining characteristic of systems that provide clean water in the United States is their fragmentation. According to a 2019 report authored by Dr. Manny Teodoro, there are approximately 1,200 community water systems in Ohio alone. The largest 26 of these serve almost 6 million people in Ohio, more than half the state's population. But almost 900 of these water systems are small or very small, serving less than 3,000 people each. Together, they collectively serve only about 6% of Ohio's population. The financial challenges for small systems can be daunting because they have a smaller customer base to pay for their expensive water infrastructure. The Ohio EPA, as well as water policy specialists, have long advocated for the consolidation of some of these systems to create economies of scale.
We've been lucky to be able to work with several projects where communities have implemented what we would call a regionalization project, meaning that they chose to work together. One good example was the village of New Waterford and the Crestview School District. The Crestview School District, which is a public water system, was having a lot of struggles trying to maintain their water system and provide good quality water. The school is only about a mile or two outside of the village of New Waterford. So when they did their analysis, they decided that it was cheaper and more efficient to have the village send a line out to the Crestview School and supply water.
My name's Shane Petrone. I'm the mayor for the Village of New Waterford. We're a rural community. There's not a lot of population. Our town's between 1,000 to 1,500 people. We're close to everywhere, but it's kind of quiet here. We like our small town life. We got a good local school district that's very involved in the community, and we've run a water line about 2 miles up the road to our local school district, Crestview Local Schools. We just completed that. Matter of fact, we're doing bacteria testing for those who know what that is. So we're just in the final throes of doing that, and then we'll actually be able to move forward with that. Now, we do have some residents that live outside the village that are along that new line that have expressed interest. About 10 to 13 new customers already want to be added to the village water system. When you're small, especially like us, you have to find a way to still cover your fixed costs. There's a fee there. If I had 4,000 people, that fee could probably be $12 a customer instead of $37. So that part makes it hard. That plays a big part. And the only future I see for towns like us is expanding our water base, whether it's expanding the village corporation limits or expanding services for water or sewer outside of the village. You need to grow or to continue to increase that base, or you're stuck increasing those costs as they go up, because electric, gas, they don't go down for you at home, they don't go down for us as a town. So as they increase, that bill goes up, whether you spread it among the 800 or 400 or the 4,000. We know we need to expand. It's got to happen. We can't continue to ask the same 480 water customer accounts to continue to pay more and more as costs increase. So we know we have to have more customers. So expansion is the only way to do that. Well, our plan was, first you make sure you have the water. So we put in new wells, we added the water supply. The second issue was, what are our major problems? We added new filters to our water plant, upgraded our water plant so we could handle the additional supply, and then the distribution system. Now we're in a position where we can go out to outside community areas that want water.
all of our wells come in at this one point right here. We have our raw flow meter that tracks everything we bring in. From there, you can follow the top line. That's all the raw water that's going into each of our filters. When we redid the plant a couple years ago, each filter is rated for 83 gallons per minute. From there, it goes down to the bottom blue line, and it goes into our clear well on the other side. Once it goes into there, we have our 2 high service pumps that send it out to the village. We're not a direct feed to the towers. Everyone's tapped in along the way. So as it's going to our storage facilities, people are using it. That's about it. It's a really simple, efficient operation. That's what, when we were looking at upgrading, we wanted to get the easiest, most user-friendly. Anyone can come in, grab the binder I have for all of our SOPs, look at the backwash, and just 1, 2, 3, 4 right down the steps. So this is the sewer side. All of our headworks come in here through a newly updated automatic bind screen to get all the rags and the grit. And then the treatment process we use is an open air extended aeration. So what you see behind you is our 3 aeration ditches. That brings the oxygen into it and keeps the right bugs alive to cannibalize the solids and keep the bad bacteria out. This is one of the easier plants to run.
The Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance administers the Drinking Water Assistance Fund and other funding programs that provide financing to communities and public water systems for their infrastructure needs. So on an average year, we work with approximately 100 communities on wastewater infrastructure projects and maybe 80 or 90 communities on drinking water infrastructure projects. They come from all around the state, and on an average year, we may finance perhaps $600 or $700 million worth of projects on the wastewater side, and maybe about $250 million worth of projects on the drinking water side.
Well, for someone the size of New Waterford and for the smaller communities, there's no feasible way for us to change our distribution system, add lines, update stuff without the possibility of grants. The cost involved in pipe and valves and fire hydrants have just increased and continue to increase every year. It would probably take about 400 years for the average town like New Waterford to pay for that type of system. Given the 50-year lifespan for a distribution system, we'll be a little bit outdated by the time that we come to replacement.
New Waterford is a good example of how local officials can take proactive measures to build and maintain modern water infrastructure. The process can be rewarding, but also time-consuming, not to mention financially straining. One of the most important resources for communities in rural Ohio is the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, RCAP, a national network of nonprofit partners that, among other things, assist local officials in their efforts to build and maintain water infrastructure.
We can help communities in a number of ways. Oftentimes we're asked to come in and help them figure out funding strategy to pay for significant capital upgrades they may need for their water or sewer system.
I love RCAP. I offer to do any commercial they want. I tell them that if they need anything, I'm there for them. They have been key for us. They are your first call. If you're a smaller sized entity, you need to call RCAP.
You run into people sometimes who complain about their water bill.
Every now and again, you'll hear the grumblings, and usually what I tell them is, we're one of the only areas in the state, not even bringing up our size, that within the last 4 or 5 years, everything is brand new. We live in a small town. So unfortunately, one of the drawbacks of that is you don't have as many people, so it costs a little bit extra. So we just kind of like to remind them, our water bill is a little bit higher, but we've made all these improvements. And then we remind them as well that through RCAP, assistance and EPA and rural water and USDA, all the grant work that came in, we're able to get a lot of taxpayer money back to finance these projects. And I pay more for my cell phone bill than I do for my water and sewer, right? So.
Cool. All right, Chad. Thanks, man.
Oh, you're welcome.
New Waterford's line extensions are an example of successful consolidation of water services. Another example to look at is Mount Ayr, an even smaller community in Ohio where neighbors have historically managed their own drinking water system.
Mount Ayr started off as kind of a weekend retreat, vacation, wellness community for professionals. A lot of the homes were built in the 20s, 30s, 40s. A lot of unique features and a lot of challenges along with that as well. We have not a lot of homes on small one-lane streets in a very wooded, secluded area, but we are literally minutes from 270, 315. Any conveniences we need are right at our fingertips, but it truly feels like we're living in the woods, and I love it that way. So when the houses were originally built, given they weren't year-round, we were all on septic and individual wells. Over the years, some of the homes started to have individual well failures, and there was a gentleman down the street. He created a nice well and a pump down there, and they started connecting homes to the system, and over time, 40s, 50s, 60s, it evolved into about 50 homes that were on this community well system. We understand better than most neighborhoods how interconnected we are. We've had to work together, especially the last number of years, to keep water coming to everybody's homes, and we've had to work as a team, and we've had to be, very much aware of our neighbors who, when the water's down, maybe can't carry gallons of water around and flush their toilets and go to the store and buy bottled water and things like that. We understood what it was to be a community, and I don't know that a lot of neighborhoods these days have those opportunities.
$839, $800, $839, $800, $600. So yesterday we used 9,600 gallons, which is quite a bit less than the day before, which does surprise me. And then I took the chlorine test here in what they call plant production, which is a fancy name for our pump house. This is something that has to be done every single day, and if I am gone out of town or whatever, I have to arrange for somebody to come and do it. I've got two of our neighbors trained as backup. I do tend to leave the lights on, so I've got a house plant here growing to the wall. I am actually a Class A certified water system operator. I would say the biggest challenge in having to run the system, well, first of all, being consistent. You have to incorporate in your morning routine, like you get up and brush your teeth, you get up and brush your teeth and go down and do the testing. And then the second thing was, particularly early on, knowing what to do when there's a break. It was a matter of calling up neighbors, hey, you want to come out and play in the mud? And there were a number of folks that had stepped up over the years to do that in all kinds of weather. Our current system is not metered, so there's a flat rate that everybody would pay per quarter, and it's for all the water you can use. The system is over 60 years old, and I always try to acknowledge that it was a wonderful neighborhood project at that time, but it's 60 years old, and it just was getting to the point where it just was not going to be able to go on.
We started noticing we were having more frequent breaks, and the breaks were, not the normal wear and tear things. These were splits in the line, vertical splits. These were As we were making repairs, we were finding the lines were crumbling. More and more breaks, more and more repairs, more and more expense. We realized at that point that our system was going to need something major, and we didn't know how extensive it was going to need to be, and we didn't know how big of a project that would be, but I knew that we were on borrowed time, and that was about 8 years ago. I contacted City of Columbus. I contacted Delco Water and Aqua, so the three basic systems that were in near proximity, just to say, what would it take? What are our options here? We got into a lot of conversation at that point with the EPA about our concerns, the frequent breaks, our concern that we weren't going to be able to maintain the water quality, that we weren't going to be able to stay in compliance.
As the neighbors looked for alternatives to build a more resilient and modern water system, they decided to create a regional water district. Often, water and sewer districts are simply providers of clean water services. They have their own pumps, their own wells, their own drinking water and wastewater treatment plants. In Mount Ayr, the residents were less ambitious, but not less strategic. They wanted to create a water district for three main reasons. First, so that legally, they would have better access to public financing to update their system. Second, so that they could engage in a contract with a water company that would sell them water. And third, so that they could assess property owners for the charges that would apply for the construction of the new system.
We were able to get a 30-year no-interest loan, which covered the cost of the construction, which was in and of itself amazing.
The water is great. It's about 1/10 of the hardness of the water that we had before. No sediment in it. Our dishwasher is nice and clean now, doesn't have scale all over it. Our kitchen sink isn't spraying all over, with the faucet getting all the mineral deposit on it. And so I think overall everything has really come out very, very well. The last little pieces are finally just falling into place.
Our community is sharing the cost to run our lines, and people don't realize how expensive water lines are until they have to run a whole new system. The balance for us is that we realize the values of our homes are going to go up by virtue of having a sustainable centralized water source. So for us, the alternative wasn't, do we stay with our old system and keep it going or upgrade at cost? It was, we're going to not have water at all, or we have to do this upgrade. And what's the least expensive upgrade that brings us the best value and a long-term future in our neighborhood, keeps it in the township? We stumbled into that. It was a miracle.
Well, the story of Cleveland's not so different than most cities, I would say, east of the Mississippi River, which are older, more industrial cities. Water for decades was a throwaway commodity utility. We stopped funding infrastructure. And our infrastructure and our water infrastructure sat there just kind of dormant for decades before we realized, hey, we actually need clean water, we need to invest. And because of that, rates had to go up.
One test, known as a fermentation test, indicates the presence of contamination. Furthermore, the water is examined for microscopic organisms.
Rates for drinking and wastewater treatment grew as cities like Cleveland developed their water infrastructure to meet the regulatory mandates and standards necessary to secure clean water. As sewer and water rates increased, so did the number of customers who fell behind in paying their bills. This was a problem for many years, but the COVID-19 pandemic made it worse. One report shows that in Northeast Ohio, the number of homeowners and renters that are at least a month late in their bills tripled during the pandemic. When customers fall behind in their water bills, utilities eventually shut off their service and, in many instances, can place a water bill tax lien on delinquent properties. This means that customers who fail to pay their bills could have their properties foreclosed, a problem that affects poor families almost exclusively. Because one of the central messages from public officials in the earlier stages of the pandemic was to urge people to wash their hands often, Cleveland Water, the public utility that provides water to the city, enacted a shut-off moratorium in March 2020 to ensure that everybody could access clean water on a sustained basis. The moratorium lasted until July 2021, when the utility resumed disconnections for non-paying customers. Many decried these shutoffs as inhumane and detrimental to public health. But others defend shutoffs, arguing that only a small percentage of delinquent customers are actually struggling financially to pay their bills. They argue that, after all, there are water affordability programs available to customers, but only a fraction of qualified users chooses to enroll in them. Advocates for water affordability argued that this is an area where utilities need to make a considerable improvement, especially investing more in public outreach so that populations in need can take advantage of the affordability programs they offer. Water affordability advocates often engage in heated debates with utilities about how to protect affordability for struggling customers. But these relationships don't always have to be contentious. In Cleveland, a community of leaders from different backgrounds have been able to work together to engage in meaningful conversations about the value of water infrastructure and who should pay for it.
We created the Greater Cleveland Water Equity Group. And so that group is comprised of community groups, local water authorities and agencies, and various entities from throughout the community in Greater Cleveland. One of these subcommittees is the Water Affordability Subcommittee, and I sit on that committee where we're having conversations about community education, what are some of the changes that we need to make in Northeast Ohio, how can we better work together.
These conversations have been instrumental in helping improve affordability programs offered by the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, a large utility that serves the wastewater treatment needs of Cleveland and 61 other communities across 350 square miles. The water infrastructure the district operates is not cheap.
Treating the wastewater is difficult because we have a lot of different inputs and we have a large volume. We, at this plant, handle about 100 million gallons per day of wastewater. The typical size of a wastewater plant in the state of Ohio is up to 10 million gallons per day. So we are definitely much bigger in terms of that volume of water that comes in. It comes in dirty from the sewers and it goes out clean out to the river. And in the middle, we're cleaning it by removing a bunch of solids in various processes. Basically, you can see down there with those little teeth, kind of like a comb, and stuff will stick to the bottom of it, and then they'll scrape it up and drop it onto that conveyor belt in the back. That conveyor belt then goes and drops the stuff into the pan. And it's catching all the big stuff that's in the water. Like paper towel white type of material is probably the most common. Now that we're heading toward fall, we'll see a ton of leaves. And then trash, like you see water bottles in here, cans, all that kind of stuff. Those solids then have to have somewhere to go. So what happens in a lot of cities is something like we do, which is incineration.
So the sludge is being fed into the centrifuge and the water is being squeezed out of it so that then the sludge is pretty dry when you're done. So we call it cake after it's pretty dry. This is a pump that feeds the cake all the way through over to where the incinerators are on the other side of the building.
If we do it right, if the sludge is dry enough, and when we have our conditions set up just right, we don't even need any other fuel except for the fuel value of the sewage. Some of the heat from that process, we make steam and spin a turbine. And when we have a good amount of steam going, that's enough to power all of the process equipment in the building.
This is our biology team. In the summertime, this is a very happening place. We do beach monitoring. Our plants are required to chlorinate their effluent, so we have bacteria samples from the plants, stormwater samples, and they'll run hundreds of samples a day. One of the tests that we run is something called whole effluent toxicity. It's where we take our treated effluent and we put native species in it to make sure there's no signs of toxicity. These are fathead minnow. Oh, see, they're coming up. They think I'm food. We basically take very small, like less than 24-hour organisms to do the tests on. These are all of our breeding fish. They lay eggs. I don't know if you can see them there, but you can see the little fry. That's what we do the tests on.
Work at the lab is key to ensure that the treated water reaches all the regulatory standards mandated by the Federal Clean Water Act.
There's something called the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, NPDES. That is the program that dictates what is on our discharge permits. It tells us what parameters we have to test for, what sampling points at the plant we have to, if it's the raw influent, the treated effluent, if it's the sludge, if it's downstream on the Cuyahoga River. It defines all of that, as well as the frequency that we have to test.
So who pays for the water treatment plants, the labs, and the salaries of the hundreds of workers who work for the district?
The vast majority of the dollars that we have available come from our ratepayers. We finance our major projects through low-interest loans that the federal government provides, but the loans have to be paid back, and those dollars that pay them back come from our ratepayers. Every 5 years we do a rate study, and that study basically, in the most simplistic terms, looks at what are our financial needs to run this organization, to provide the service to our customers, and what is the amount of money we need to collect for those. But we also have always looked at affordability. So we have for many years offered affordability or cost-saving programs.
The district offers different programs to keep their services affordable to individuals in need. The two most popular programs in terms of the number of people who enroll in them are the Homestead Program and the Affordability Program. The Homestead Program is for low-income individuals in the Water District who are senior or disabled. Enrolled customers receive a 40% discount on their sewer bill. The Affordability Program is for low-income individuals regardless of age or ability, and these residents also receive a 40% discount. Starting on January 1st, 2022, the district made a couple of important changes.
It's the affordability program that we recently enhanced, offering it to renters. It has long been an issue in our industry. How do we reach renters? And we discovered through our rate study that many of them pay the sewer and water bill directly. And in those cases, we are offering the same 40% discount. We also decided to enhance the program by expanding the eligibility from not 200% of poverty. We expanded that to 250%. Those two changes increased the number of people who are eligible for that program by 40,000.
Everybody concerned with the issue of affordability agrees that these changes are a step in the right direction. But what prompted the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District to adopt these changes?
I think they did some very necessary work in community listening. They met with the advocacy community several times to talk about the needs of the community. I know I went in and did several presentations about our community listening tour to make them aware of what I was hearing in communities throughout Northeast Ohio. Additionally, they also convened an internal water affordability group or task force to really examine what are some of the things and changes that they can make that did not require state legislation, that did not require some additional federal investment. And so that's the type of thought leadership that we need to start to address the challenges that we're seeing across the region, honestly.
Nonprofit organizations, advocacy organizations play a major role. They do a great deal of boots on the ground, listening to what communities need. They provide information about those needs, making sure that information is shared. I think their perspectives are very important, and they certainly informed us. But we also do a lot of education of the NGOs so that they also understand our perspective.
While encouraging changes seem to be taking place, efforts to improve affordability must continue, as many families still struggle to pay their bills on time.
We know that we need debt forgiveness programs. We need a moratorium, a permanent moratorium on water shutoffs, because that is not the solution to providing aid to families in their time of need. We need emergency assistance programs. And then we need to really improve relationships with local utilities so that we could influence water rate setting processes and make sure that community is at the table for that process.
Toledo is really too hard on itself. The interesting thing is, if you look around, there's so much here. There's a lot of natural beauty in this area. We're right on a great lake. So we have a lot of access to outdoor activities and recreation, which is really wonderful, all centered on water.
Nick Comives chairs the Water Quality and Sustainability Committee of Toledo City Council. This committee is tasked with overseeing the city's Department of Public Utilities, which in turn provides drinking water and wastewater treatment services to residents in Toledo and its surrounding area. Toledo's water treatment plant filters an average of 75 million gallons of water per day.
We supply water to about 500,000 people in this region, and that is a huge deal for us. But the affordability piece is where we're lacking, and I think that a lot can be done legislatively to correct that.
In Toledo, discussions about water quality and affordability are not new. The Maumee River, which runs through the city, has long been identified as the main culprit in the annual harmful algal blooms that affect Lake Erie. And Lake Erie is where Toledo gets its drinking water. Every spring, as rains intensify, the Maumee River collects runoff from farms in a wide area of the state. The runoff is heavy in phosphorus and nitrogen, which farmers use to fertilize their fields. These nutrients can help trigger algal blooms in Lake Erie when water temperatures rise. The blooms can contaminate the water with dangerous toxins, which in turn can negatively affect humans that consume it. On August 2, 2014, residents of Toledo awoke to urgent warnings from their public utility department not to drink or use their tap water. Toxins from a harmful algal bloom had penetrated the city's drinking water system. The warning remained in effect for over 50 hours.
Oh, that was crazy because we were supposed to have a little family reunion. When the announcement came, I just immediately jumped up and had to go try to get water. I had family that went to a funeral in Detroit. I sent them a text and said, while y'all up there, get water. I have a godson in Columbus. I even told him, you get some water, I'll meet you halfway.
Mrs. Sidney is a resident of the Junction, a Toledo neighborhood where neighbors quickly organized to face this crisis.
We found out at 5 o'clock in the morning. Our young people woke up and got into trucks and got into their parents' vehicles and went to get gallons and cases of water, delivering it to our elders and mothers with children because there's a disparity of transportation. Families couldn't get out. And so there was no water at our local convenience stores, and there was price gouging because people knew that folks would be buying water. So we drove to Detroit, Michigan. We drove to areas where we could get access to water, bottled water.
I do have a couple seniors in my block, so I was getting them water. So it was crazy because then you thinking like, you gotta take the bottled water to wash up with, so you had to go old school.
The only thing I can say was very traumatic. It was the closest thing to something to being apocalyptic. We were without water for 3 or 4 days, which opened a lot of people's eyes to how important water is to just basic living. There's a lady that drinks a cup of coffee every morning, and we knocked on her door and we grabbed her coffee because it was green. As an elderly lady, her vision wasn't as it used to be. She had this cup of coffee that's supposed to be black, which actually had a green tint to it.
The water crisis refocused the mission of the Junction Coalition, whose members became more active in demanding that city officials double their efforts to provide access to clean and affordable water.
Junction has worked with Freshwater Future to create a community water council where the community, nothing but the community. Politicians can't sit on that council. We don't want them over there. That allows for folks to have a viable voice, to speak up and speak out for the change they want for their water systems, their affordability, their water quality, and their access to safe, affordable drinking water.
As local advocates started joining forces and paying more attention to the importance of protecting access to clean water all, a coalition of NGOs, elected officials, and utility workers started to take shape.
Several water advocates in this area and I kept having conversations, and I decided through some conversations with them that we would create a formal consumer protection group that would be set up. So it was passed by resolution. It's a binding contract or a binding thing that the city must do now at this point. Now, because of this relationship that we've created, gives the residents of this city a meaningful voice in the decisions that are being made about their water, right? Because government is made up of people, and so it's their decision to have. So we've ultimately created a direct line for residents to interact with our head of the Department of Public Utilities. So any decision about water affordability, about conservation, about upgrades to our infrastructure is looked at by the people who live in the city, and it has made it so much better and so much easier for us because you have ultimate buy-in, and we're building trust that has long been eroded. I will say in the beginning, it was pretty contentious. Who's gonna be there? Who's gonna attend? You know, what ultimately can we do? What can we say? Who gets to say? Those sorts of things are all, you know, working those things out in the beginning can be a little bit of a challenge. And also I think maybe the most important part hinging on this was just sort of the relationship that I think naturally happens between a government and people, right? I mean, people have a distrust of government. That's just true anywhere you go. I don't think that there's a place in the world where that's not true.
There was times where we had to pull his coattail and say, now, Councilman, we asked for A, B, C, or D now. And he says, well, how does that look? Because he doesn't know, but he's willing to listen. And that is all you can ask for from a council person, because they're there to serve the people.
Similar to other communities, the City of Toledo offers affordability programs for water users. But despite the availability of these programs, neighbors demanded deeper changes to secure affordable access to water. As a result, the Consumer Protection Board and the Water Affordability Task Force spearheaded several initiatives to work towards this goal. Perhaps the most important of these initiatives is a new debt forgiveness program for low-income, senior, or disabled Toledo residents. Under the program, those qualifying individuals who owe at least $200 in their water, sewer, and stormwater bills prior to October 2021 can have their debts forgiven, provided that they pay their more recent bills consistently.
We hold right now about $30 million in back water bills throughout the city because people simply can't afford them. We're never going to get most of that money back. But many of those folks might need a house somewhere else and they're going to need access to water. And it's necessary, right? So we should be doing all that we can to alleviate their financial burden. It's the right thing to do at the end of the day.
While offering a debt forgiveness program is by itself innovative, the devil is often in the details. How can implementation of this program be made effective? This is where utilities must show their commitment to affordability by ramping up their outreach efforts to inform the affected population of their choices.
What we recognized is, although we have all these affordability initiatives, we're not the best at promoting them and also making it so that people can get through that process easily.
As the City of Toledo continues its efforts to protect and promote affordable access to clean water, one of its main challenges is to rebuild the trust in its water services that was damaged by the 2014 water crisis. After almost 8 years, some Toledo residents are still wary of drinking the water provided by the city.
We know that empirically, if people do not believe in the quality of their water, they're going to substitute with much more expensive commercial bottled water.
In the past, we've not been the best at promoting the quality of our water and saying, like, hey, you don't need to keep buying bottled water. Like during the summer, you'll see stores with stockpiles of water in the front because they're leveraging that as like, people will have to buy bottled water. And that's not true. You can, you're paying for tap water. You can use tap water and feel confident that it's safe and it's quality water.
We still drink bottled water. I don't out the faucet, even though I have a filter. The junction provided people that came to the meetings or whatever, water filters to put on. But it's always just gonna be stuck in my head, like, what are we drinking?
Distrust is actually contagious. So you can live in a community where the tap water is of excellent quality, but if you read about a high-profile drinking water failure like Toledo, you might come to distrust your own community's water system, even though your community's water system is fine. The only way you're going to rebuild trust in those systems is by literally rebuilding those systems and making sure they're excellent. And it will take a long time, and it may take years. It may take a generation.
When it comes to water in Toledo, you can count on our residents, our community really having a huge role in what's happening. And I have seen the most repair of trust within government happen when we include people in this way.
Leadership is a beautiful thing. When you have done the people power building, when you've taken the time and you've listened, when you see the harm that not having quality water has done.
In all likelihood, as the efforts to rebuild trust continue, decision makers will be increasingly pressured by those they serve, who believe that no decisions about something as critical as water can be made without their input.
The engineers are at the table. The politicians are at the table, making decisions based on their income, based on their privilege. You can't do that when you have something as precious as liquid gold, water. And we're not asking public utilities to come to the table. They have to. There's a demand from the community. There's a demand from the people that you need to sit down and hear the voices of those who have lived without their water.
There are no easy answers. The causes of our water affordability problems are complicated, and complicated problems usually require complicated solutions. We need to do lots of things, to address affordability. There's no one thing that's going to solve all of the problems.
Ask folks what they want done to them, for them, and do it with them. Nothing about us without us.
Do they got water on the north side? Do they got water on the east side? Tell me. Do they got water on the west side? Do they got water on the south side? Let the water flow to the north side. Let the water flow to the east side. Let the water flow to the west side. Let the water flow to the south side. Love is a lot like the water. People just can't live without it. Water been here since we started. Now they be charging for bottles. Worldwide thirst trying to grind for survival. Pollution in the droughts been hurting us to swallow. Gotta start saving up for the kids of tomorrow. Go and cherish every drop, no waste, that's the motto. What? Save that water, clean that water, drink that water. Save that water, clean that water, drink that water. Yeah. Save that water, clean that water, drink that water. Yeah. Save that water. Do they got water on the north side? Do they got water on the east side? Tell me. Do they got water on the west side? Do they got water on the south side? Let the water flow to the north side. Let the water flow to the east side. Let the water flow to the west side. Let the water flow to the south side. Let the water rain down worldwide. Let the seeds grow in the sunshine. Yeah, yeah. Let the water rain down worldwide. Let the seeds grow in the sunshine. Save that water, clean that water, drink that water. Save that water, clean that water, drink that water. Save that water, clean that water, drink that water. Save that water, clean that water, drink that water.
Okay, so I hope you like it. I would like to acknowledge a few people in the room that are there. So I'm going to ask them to stand up one at a time, if that's okay. And I'm going to start with Dr. Manny Teodoro here to my right, who's a dear friend and colleague. That soothing voice that you heard through the movie is the narration of Dr. Nick Breifogel, who's standing here. Thank you, Nick. My friend Eugene Bragg, who is provided some of the music for the movie, and he's a water specialist too. So thank you, Eugene. And then I have some of our stars in the last two segments, Mrs. Aina Sidney. Thank you for making it. Next to her, Alicia Smith from the Junction Coalition. And finally, Crystal Davis from the Alliance for the Great Lakes. So, thank you all. Thank you. Joe?
So we are open for questions now. We have about 20 minutes, 15 minutes for questions. So please just raise your hand if you have one. We'll take our first question from one of the YouTube viewers right now. Janet Lasley asks, and this is for anyone who wants to answer, really. We have lots of microphones, so please, if you think you can answer this question, raise your hand. Has there been any change to utilizing plants to help clean the water coming into the water plants? So I think like biological plants. So I'll ask it again. Has there been any change to utilizing plants, biological plants, to help clean the water coming into the water plants? Cincinnati has started to encourage this neighborhood by neighborhood.
So in Toledo, there has been green infrastructure and bioswales that, for instance, if you take a home and you tear it down, you don't just leave the land vacant. You actually do a bioswale or some green infrastructure infusion with the engineers, and that has helped to do some of the cleaning and reduce some of the pressure on the water plants in Toledo.
Thank you, Alicia. Yeah, Greg, let me run a mic to you. And when you are asking a question, please do speak into the mic so then the folks on the live stream can hear.
One of our friends from DNR here. Wetland program. Oh, Eric Sauce, sorry. You might want to say this, but the state's ODNR Wetland H2 Ohio program does that on a grand scale. And you could say more if you want.
All right, Suzanne.
Just saying plants, they require much more land. So if you have a big city, you can't use really plant infrastructure efficiently because you don't have the density. You need a lot of land. So these systems are really good for rural areas, but are not really practical for municipal huge flows like they were talking about in Toledo in the treatment of the sewage.
Thank you. All right, Kalia.
I actually have a question for you, Ms. Alicia. Your quote, "Nothing for us without us." Could you speak more to what it means to rely on the expertise of community when making these big decisions to overturn systems?
So the one thing that we're really big for in Junction and across the Blue Network, which is all of the regions, is education. So many times things are being done to community. For instance, you come in and you have water rates that are now going to be, what, Nick, is it a 68% hike in 1 year, each year? And families are not aware. Right now, we just had $10 million for lead line replacement. And everyone's celebrating, but no one's doing the education on water samples, filter, flushing, all of those things within community. So nothing about us without us means sit us at the table, teach, and then provide the community with the education so that we can be able to build on what you need. It makes a lot easier for our public servants, #politicians, whichever one they want to be, to do their jobs. And so that's what it is. Nothing about us without us is us too, as community members, doing the work. So in academia, sitting down and saying, okay, what is it that you need to do? The research that the great doctor has done, thank you, using those stats, the qualitative and qualitative information. What are the narratives and what are the numbers and how do they meet? And so once you teach that to Mama Johnson, she's gonna tell everybody. And then when you teach it over to PhD candidate Alicia Smith, she's gonna tell the folks that are in this room, and then we'll begin to write about it. Doc, you talked about writing papers, but also doing the documentaries. And seeing the young people at the end lifting that story, because we know climate resilience doesn't happen without young people, right? And so they begin to tell the story in the way into which is native to them. So that's basically it.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question to Ramiro. You shared with us 3 lessons learned from your experience in this. Now that we've seen the documentary, how does this change the way that you teach or you're going to approach your research? How has this process over the last year or so making this film, everyone you've talked to, how has that changed your approach to being a professor?
I wish. Hello? We didn't rehearse this. Joe, you should have sent me the question yesterday. So You know, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I know that I had a lot of fun doing this, and I would like to do more of this, because I think that, you know, getting outside of my comfort zone is good for us, but also for the people that we are thinking about when we do research, right? Sometimes we do the research, we have a certain population in mind, but the truth is they never get to actually see what we do or even understand it, because we're in academia, as you know, all of you who have been to school or have taught, sometimes we're not very well prepared, right, to transfer, you know, knowledge in an accessible way. And for me, it was a learning experience. I got as much or more from the people that I interviewed that I'm giving back. So this was an exercise to amplify voices, right? That's all we wanted, to just keep the conversation going. I wish I had, you know, a couple $1 million to make a series of documentaries about water affordability, because then, you know, every one of these vignettes that you saw could be expanded into, like, you know, a feature-length film, each of them. Well, we don't have those resources, but at least, you know, we are bringing people in the room that have to talk to each other and have to hang out with each other, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm going to show this in my class, Joe, and I hope that you show it too, right? I'm counting on you for that. And let's do more if we can.
Thank you. So we have another question from the live stream. Ron Martin Jr. asks, and this could go to really anyone in the room because there's so many experts in this. Has there been any progress in reducing non-point source pollution, especially agricultural runoff, that has a huge impact on the water quality, especially in the western Lake Erie? So if anyone wants to address nutrient runoff into western Lake Erie.
Yeah, I'm Peter McDonough with the ODA, Department of Agriculture, and I'm here with my colleagues. The H2 Ohio program that has been implemented through the Ohio Department of Agriculture has made a really big effort to address just that issue by implementing, implementing resources to incentivize conservation towards the effect of reducing nutrient loss in the western Lake Erie Basin. So there's a lot of work being done and will continue to be done to that effect. And we're also working on a statewide watershed program to continue that work as well.
I'm going to speak from my former position as Sandusky River Watershed Coordinator, and knowing the watershed continues and has expanded their effort on educating everyone and their role that they play. It's not just agriculture, it's all residents of the watershed and how they interact together and how they each contribute. They have had connections between the municipal water and wastewater or facilities with agriculture, with just regular residents to help them understand. And I think those kind of things get forgotten about, but they are happening. And so that is important to keep in mind, that there is that activity going on, which would benefit your effort as well.
And I'll add on to that. I want to applaud the work of the H2 Ohio program. It's a sizable down payment on what we know is a big ticket item and an issue in Lake Erie. And a lot of my advocacy is around that work, also as an Ohio Lake Erie commissioner. But I'll say that it's still not enough. And so, you know, as my grandma said, we don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. We don't want to, you know, be ungrateful for this amazing program that we have. But we know that it's going to take more than that. We can talk about the other sources of pollution, but we know that more than 88% of what we're seeing in terms of pollution in Lake Erie is from large-scale agricultural operations. And so we can talk about, you know, runoff from when you wash your car in the driveway, but that's not what we're talking about in Lake Erie. And so I think that there are still tweaks that need to be made to make the program stronger. And I'm excited that we have an administration that's open to having those conversations, which I think is the important part, because I've been able to have access to the administration and say, okay, what happens if this doesn't work? What is the contingency plan? What are the interim targets? We didn't meet the interim targets. What are the long-term goals? And then how are we going to do equitable stakeholder engagement along the way? that's an area where we really have an opportunity to grow. I'm going in a lot of rooms where it's not enough people that look like me in the room, like this room. And so what we need to do is have these conversations outside of these walls. I applaud everybody that was a part of making these documentaries and doing the research. How do we make that research walk? How do we take that into our communities and serve as translators so that people understand this and can apply it? And I'm happy that I'm working with the administration on talking about programs like the State Revolving Fund and them saying, okay, how do we do this? How do we have educational sessions? But more of that is going to happen for us to make the impact that we want to and we need to have in the Western Basin of Lake Erie.
So my question is for folks in Cleveland or elsewhere. I'm wondering if you had much pushback from ratepayers who resented perhaps the relief of debt and other rate reductions for some part of the community, but not all parts. And did you do special outreach, or hopefully people see that it's the human thing to do and it builds a better community in the process?
We actually did a door-to-door canvassing process where we took the time to educate folks that, yes, there needs to be a debt forgiveness. We called Roger Colton in, who does more qualitative, to capture the narrative for a water affordability plan. Dr. Toro, we definitely need to talk because there needs to be a qualitative. How does this impact so people can see the numbers? But we were able to show folks that in Toledo, in Junction, everyone was able to give $10 a month to help to relieve others who didn't have the income to help pay. And I can tell you that there were mostly our elders, because even with the homestead, it's still a lot of money, for folks to pay. We went from quarterly water bills to monthly bills without any notification to the community. Imagine what that was like. When we began to do the lead line replacement, the federal EPA requires 45 days and you get this letter. And the letter has so much terminology that you're like, what in the world? And so I would begin to get calls. Mama Bush would call. Her mother's 98 years old. She's the young lady that had the green film on her cup. So when we pick up the phone, now what is this, Alicia? What am I supposed to do? They done put a bottle on this porch. I don't know what's going on. The bottle was for sampling the water, capture the water, but there's no explanations that go along with that. So you have to begin to educate. So the answer to your question is yes, we put together an affordability plan, but we also put together a pool of money to help take the weight off of others. But that was the community. We then had to bring Mr. Nick Comize, our councilman, and Ed Moore, our director, to a table. They created a water task force, which is really nice for municipalities to hear. We created a water council in community because we were tired of being sick and tired, right? So the two came together, and that's what created, So the two came together, and that's what created, thank you, the ability for us to create an ordinance that is now on the books, legislation, that actually says you have to have an affordability plan. You have to review homestead, you have to review the debt forgiveness, because debt forgiveness doesn't work if you don't have some type of pool of money. So let me help you. The existing funds that you can tap into for things like water affordability, CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Funds, you can use that to relieve pressure off of disadvantaged communities. Why not give money to folks within our community who have lead lines, and you can replace those lead lines for free based on taxpayer dollars? How innovative is that? So what happens is you can't discover those things without sitting at the table. And then, Doc, you talked about academia. Academia actually went door to door with us and began to write about the narratives they were hearing from the residents and how it impacted their public health. A whole nother space. How children were being impacted, lead line replacement and the impact of cognitive disabilities, the school to prison pipeline, so social engagement. And then it all becomes to grants. There are philanthropists that can't wait to throw money at this, but you have to have a narrative.
Great, thank you all. Yeah, we can do one more question.
I'll actually ask the question. So the Mount Air story is very interesting to me. As a rural person, my parents actually, we have to haul water. They have to haul water and stuff. It's sort of like their drinking water. But so editorial decisions. So you tell the story. Mount Air obviously is very privileged. They're located near the Delco, so they could actually access that. A lot of rural places don't have that luxury. Did you have any options of studying communities where the water system failed and they did not have any opportunity to sort of like recover? Because it seems like that could easily be the opposite. The outcome of a story like that could be that they couldn't replace the water system and they were all out of luck.
Yeah, we just need money to make the next film. If I can get some support, we can do a movie. Yeah, so, you know, that's a really good point, right? So we are missing chunks of the state where we know that there are big infrastructure problems. You know, we didn't get to cover Appalachia, for instance. We thought, you know, if we bring Appalachia, it's a movie by itself, right? So yeah, we try to, the other thing is that we try to focus on things that we saw as successful, right? Or, you know, experiences where people are working together, where, you know, the water advocates are putting that pressure on the politicians, and the politicians are, you know, responding to that because that pressure is there, right? So we tried to show that, you know, regarding water, we could focus on conflict, but in reality, we know that collaboration, cooperation saves the day, right? So water problems are cooperation problems, not only in Ohio, but everywhere in the world and, you know, across the nation and in other places. I'm originally from Argentina, so I learned this the hard way too. I grew up in my neighborhood walking around the corner to go get water from the community well until we got water when I was in my teens. So, yeah, I know the importance of exploring failure, but I also, you know, we had to make decisions and we decided to focus on things that we see as examples of success. But yeah, looking forward to maybe having another project for that. So, thank you.
Well, there you go, an aspiring filmmaker. A big round of applause for the whole team. When Ramiro pitched this to me, he was making it very clear one of his aspirations was this would be an instructional video that could be used in classes. He's hoping it can be used by people across the country that are teaching water policy and governance classes. So there is really a master agenda here in terms of sort of like this is more than just simply sharing it with you all, but the idea is that we're going to make it available to a lot of people for instructional purposes. And in my opinion, it sort of exceeded my expectations in terms of what you delivered. So wonderful job, Ramiro. If there's any other aspiring filmmakers out there and stuff, look at what you can do with a very modest budget and a lot of passion. So appreciate that. Ramiro, as is in our tradition with EPN, we do have some plaques for you, and we have three excellent speakers scheduled to come up here that are participants in this. What we'll do is we'll hand those out here in just a moment over here as we take some pictures. A reminder that, so if you were involved in the film or you were one of the featured speakers a little bit, just gather over here and we'll take a group picture before we wrap up this portion of the program. A reminder that WAMO is hosting the 2022 Ohio River Symposium this Friday, and virtual participation is still available. Please visit WAMO's table in the registration area for more details. So if you want to continue this conversation, there's that. Check out the content in your program for details of recent and upcoming EPN events. Pay attention to our YouTube channel. If you appreciated this, we do make this content available through our YouTube channel. So spread it around. We do see quite a bit of uptake on some of these programs with getting spread out there. So we appreciate that. There is actually going to be some other community engagements that Ramiro has organized in the community for Water for All. One of my favorite locations of the city is Studio 35. I think there's going to be a screening Saturday afternoon at Studio 35. So tell your friends if you want to sort of like go there. It's just a wonderful place to hang out. For Manny, Ken, and Pete, we are excited to continue to learn from you later today. And on behalf of all our event hosts, I want to thank you in advance for your remarks on the technical, financial, and policy strategies to promote water affordability. Looking to next month, I'm excited. We're going to have our annual Earth Day event. Many of you realize that we do a big event every Earth Day. It's a school's signature event, but it's kind of become OSU's signature event as well. It'll be at the Ohio Union. It's going to be not in the typical pattern. We're going to be over in the Ohio Union. April 20th in the evening to celebrate Earth Day. Exciting program there. The CEO of Nature Conservancy, Jennifer Morris, is going to be part of it. Ohio State University President Johnson is actually going to give some remarks. Jennifer Morris, the Ohio State president, or Sophia Buggs, the owner of Ladybug's Farm in Youngstown, is going to be one of our speakers. So it's going to be a great series, and we encourage you to look it up and sort of participate with us. If you join the EPN today, which is free, quick, and easy, then you'll receive updates and event programs and opportunities from the team. Visit epn.osu.edu to get that connection started. Thanks again for such a wonderful program. It's wonderful to see such great talent in our community. This has been very informative. Appreciate everybody's participation in this event, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.
So the next session with Dr. Teodoro will start in about 15 minutes, or we're going to start right at 10 o'clock. So take about 15 minutes or so, and we'll be right back in this room. Thanks.